Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine. Oh, wrong way. Wine with Women, where a bunch of women talk about the harms of gender ideology with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, and some men go insane. So, on that topic, we because of what happened last time, we do have moderation today, and it will be really quite a low tolerance threshold. So maybe sort of sarcasm won't work because you might get booted out. So today I have somebody that I've known for a really long time. That we've sort of seen this develop sort of together. But she's done such an amazing job. Worked tirelessly on attempting to raise awareness of the harms of gender ideology around children. She's been vilified and attacked for years, but she has carried on. Nevertheless, she persisted. Stephanie, welcome.
With my cup of coffee.
With your cup of coffee. I'm having my wine. Honestly, I've just cycled home from work. In a hurry, and I'm extremely thirsty, so I'll try not to guzzle it, but there we go. Anyway, it's lovely to see you.
And you, Helen.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
On your medal.
Thank you.
That must have been really quite, I don't know, just sort of quite satisfying after all these years of relentless attacks.
Well, it was something that I would never have expected to receive in my life ever. So yes, it was amazing. It was like vindication of everything that I've been saying, and I'm just thrilled that the award was for services to children, and that's a recognition that that's what I've been doing, which is what my work has been about for the last over 2 decades. And so to see, as founder of TransgenderTrend, that I'm awarded the British Empire Medal for Services to Children, and that I see that work as part of all my other work, which is concerned with the safeguarding and welfare of children. And to have that recognised at this level it's amazing. And I think it not only vindicates my work, but it vindicates all the parents who, to me, are the most thoughtful parents who want to know the facts and the evidence and the research supporting this before encouraging their child towards, an almost inevitable medical transition.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it, that you've got TransgenderTrend on one side offering really quite sort of fact-based, sort of logical evidence, and then you've got on the other side mermaids pretty much who are just affirm and the attempts to silence sort of the other side, and you've got these two really quite wildly different approaches. Mm-hmm. And yet one is massively sort of celebrated and one is vilified, and yet that's all you have to do is look on the TransgenderTrend website, and you can see just really thoughtful blogs, like articles from people who have clearly done, made such an effort to sort of think things through, gather evidence, and actually present things, the other side, what is actually happening.
Well, it was what concerned me from the start, is that there was one voice on this, and it was an ideological position, and that parents, when they were looking online for information, could only find that. So I wanted to put together a resource in one place online for parents, which was it was evidence and research. So what are the facts behind this, but also analysis of what was happening and why it was happening. So I think there was analysis of studies, there was analysis of the approach and the ideas behind it. To start the conversation, and because my one of my first aims was to get the conversation going, because it wasn't happening. On the subject of children, there was silence, and I was coming from the parenting advice world and teaching world, which is where I was working. So normally, when there's anything new, and this sort of landed as if it was, completely a done deal. This is, transgender children being
Yeah.
transitioned in schools. And normally, in schools, in the parenting advice world, if there's some new thing that comes out, everybody's talking about it. There is disagreement, sometimes very strong disagreement, and that's accepted. In this area, there was nothing except affirmations, celebration, brave trans kids, and the brave, supportive parents. So there was one message. And I know, because my area is communication, I could see straight away that sort of emotive stories and anecdotes and personal stories were being put out, which gets you emotionally and draws you in, and then you feel you can't say anything against it because it's about little kids. And so that kind of manipulation from the media immediately rang alarm bells that there was no questioning or no facts and evidence presented to support it. So yes, I wanted to, and also if you're not talking about things openly on an issue that affects children, and so seriously affects children, then you're putting children at risk. If people
Yes,
don't talk
definitely.
about something, it's children who suffer. So, I mean, I accept that people believe in gender identity. I accept that people have very different beliefs, but we can't base medical care or an approach towards children based on the beliefs of one group. We have to examine those beliefs and see if they serve the best interests of children. And in this case, my view was that they don't. They are, potentially causing great harm to children, and therefore I had to speak out about it.
And when exactly did you start Found Transgender Trend?
It was 2015 that I started, but for at least a year before that, I'd been gathering evidence, examining the evidence. I'm not a scientist, don't make any claims, but I do know, I do know enough to sort of sort out the bad studies from the robust studies. I know what to look for enough.
We've all learned that now, haven't we? We've all learned how to read a study and think, like, how was the how was the cohort gathered? How many are there? Was it self-selected? We've all learned that sort of thing now. It's been quite an interesting journey, to be honest. So for about a year beforehand, but it was 2015. You actually thought, right, I'm doing it now.
I finally published the website after a lot of pain. When I published it, it didn't display properly, and I had about a week of tearing my hair out. And I designed the website, and it was sort of a blog with as much, if you go back on TransgenderTrend and you look at, we've got pages like professionals speaking out, and I was sort of really scraping the barrel. I was trying to find people who were speaking out at the time.
Well, because people weren't, were they? I mean, in fact, you have empowered people to speak out. Well, in fact, all of us here who have everyone has, every voice that enters the fight empowers others.
I think, yes, absolutely. Everybody who speaks out, it's permission giving to others, which is why I think J.K. Rowling speaking out was so amazing and
absolutely
brave of her. But one voice gives permission. Everybody else thinks, well, I must be brave now. And I think what happened, what I've seen happen over the years. So I set up an organisation because I knew nobody would, I wanted there to be that alternative questioning voice in the press, in the media coverage. And I knew nobody would contact me because I was a nobody. So I had to have an organisation, and I had to make it really clear what it was about. And it worked very quickly, actually. I think we put out a press release and all sorts like that. But I think what I've seen happening over the last 7 years now, there are so many organisations. So I think once you set up an organisation, you do the same thing. It's permission giving to others, and it snowballs. Yes. So I think for anybody. sort of wondering about that. Just if you can do it, but I recognise that still we're in a situation where a lot of people can't.
And, yes, definitely. Is very
various
true.
reasons.
Yeah. And how, when you first set it up, it was information that you wanted to put out there. Mm-hmm. And then how did it come about that you then started, you did your schools pack? What was, how did that work?
It was the thing that parents wanted most, because parents were really concerned about the trans inclusion schools toolkits that were going into schools, and had been doing, I think it was a fairly recent thing. I think it was 2014 that the trans inclusion schools toolkit from All Sorts, based in Brighton, is used all over the country from local authorities. Sometimes just copy and paste from that toolkit. And parents kept contacting me and saying we need we need an alternative. So that was what I was working on in 2017. That year, it was mostly working on that with a fantastic teacher, safeguarding lead, and I got 2 lawyers to check it. And part of the reason I wanted to get that out was I knew that the Equality and Human Rights Commission were putting out national guidance themselves, and they had invited Stonewall, Mermaids, Gendered Intelligence, Gyres, All Sorts to a round table to discuss it, and they hadn't invited. So I contacted them and asked to be a stakeholder in that, and they invited me into a meeting. But no, it was like, and some parents came with me and professional, but there were no minutes taken. So I followed up with a sort of briefing document about my concerns so that it was on record. And I carried on contacting them over the years with parents' concerns. Every time we published something, I'd send them our publications. But I had no influence. It was very much a sort of, it was wrapped up already. I felt,
and it was just lip service that you were, they gave you some time, but they didn't actually take any of your points.
They didn't take any of my recommendations or take on board any of my concerns. No. So it was a really.
So you thought, fuck it, I'm doing my own.
Well, at that stage, I didn't know that. That was a process that happened over years. But what I did think was at the end of 2017, I met up with them. I'd already started. Yeah, I started working on the schools guidance at early 2017. But that's right. I wanted to get it out. I wanted to get it published because they were going to publish theirs in March 2018. So I had a really mad time. And I remember between Christmas and New Year, which is a time when I usually like to sit back and watch box sets. For that week, I was working like mad on finishing the school's guidance. So there's all the design and the printing and the checking it over, copy editing, still going on back and forth. But the reason I wanted to get it out was I wanted to get it out before they published theirs, and just put a spanner in the works. And it actually ended up later than I wanted. It was February, half term, and I thought this is a really bad time. Everybody on Mumsnet will be away or not going online as much.
Of course, yeah.
But I've got to get it out. So I put it out, and I think it was quite quiet for that week. And then it exploded because the lobby groups got a hold of it, and it was, it was all over Twitter, ban it, bin it, shred it. This is Stonewall put out. So Stonewall put out a statement saying it was deeply damaging. It's still on their website and has been used ever since by, this is completely unfounded, unevidenced allegations against us, but it's used as evidence that we're an anti-trans hate group by other people. I've seen it linked to so many times, that Stonewall statement. And I did write to them and ask them to either take it down or give me a right of reply, and they didn't respond. But actually, I've said this before, but I have to thank Stonewall because they brought so much attention to it that it went mad. The downloads were going mad. And so they did an awful lot of free publicity for the schools pack, and for which I'm very grateful.
Yes. Yes, no, I agree. It's like Wine with Women. Suddenly, that suddenly people have been talking about this as well because of the insanity over the one with Helen Joyce. So actually, it turns out that when people get really angry about something, it makes people come and look, doesn't it? And for you, for the schools pack, hugely,
Yeah.
So what was the reaction in schools?
It's been absolutely overwhelmingly positive. I just got a message on Twitter today of somebody who took it in, I think 3 years ago, and the school found it really helpful, and the school has been great since that time. So I still get messages from mostly I get messages from parents reporting back what their head teacher said, and they say it's practical help, it's very sensible, it's balanced, it considers the needs and rights of all pupils. I know that there are local authorities who recommend it, although I won't give you their names, because but it's fantastic, and I sometimes have a look at it and think, I wrote it a long time ago, but yes, it is. It's balanced and it's fair, and it's sort of sensible and moderate. It doesn't go into the legal stuff too much. It sort of lays it out, but I think it. I'm proud of it.
I think this is, yes, you should be, because I think this is one of the interesting things about it, is that it is quite sensible and moderate. It's sort of practical advice. It lays things out, just sort of plainly, but it really isn't propaganda.
It's like, here's the difference between sex and gender, and where is it important to base policies on sex? Where can you relax and base policies on gender? School uniforms, and then some evidence of what's happening, some testimonies from detransitioners and desisters, and they look at, like what to say to children. I think that's one of the biggest things, communication about this issue in schools, and encouragement of teachers to use their expertise, because they're used to dealing with all sorts of problems. And this one it's been mystified into this really complicated thing, and it's not. Teachers are used to dealing and need to have confidence in the sort of pastoral care of children. They're the experts, not the lobby groups, who don't. I mean, you can see that the lobby groups are not concerned with children, because what they present is a one-size-fits-all approach, which is affirming a girl as a boy or affirming a boy as a girl. And that approach is taken towards everybody, towards the late transitioning male who's been a cross-dresser all his life, towards the autistic, troubled teenage girl, towards the 4-year-old boy who likes playing with dolls. Exactly the same approach is taken to all of those really diverse and disparate groups. So if you're treating a child in the same way as you treat, a middle-aged man, you have to ask why are children being treated as adults here, as if they have full adult understanding, developmental stage, cognitive ability, etc. Because if you treat children as adults, you're going to cause harm.
Yes, absolutely. There was one really good entry on the blog that I read a little while ago. I think it was. I think one of the newspapers published a sort of a subset of it from a psychologist. I think you have. And it's such a good piece. It really explains things very well, doesn't it? The idea that actual social transition in itself is sort of harmful. It sets kids on a path which is very difficult for them to come back from.
Yeah, a childhood is not reversible. It's a really powerful piece, and it's backed up. There was a recent study that there's all, the activists are always trying to prove that all of the 12 studies we have that show that around 80% of these pre-pubertal children will desist from their feelings of gender dysphoria or, discomfort with their sex under the watchful waiting approach. So that approach might involve family therapy or developmentally informed kind of therapy, but otherwise children are left alone. And the least likely outcome would be transsexual as adults. But most would grow out of it during puberty. So there's always an attempt to, or it's been said that's a myth. Those, those studies are discredited. Well, they never have been, and also the approach of watchful waiting has never been shown to cause harm. This is really what really interests me. Why did we change that model when it was working perfectly well? No children were harmed by it. And of course, we know that the affirmation and social transition approach is an approach driven by activists, not by clinical evidence. And so the study out recently, which tried to sort of debunk that old desistance rate, was of children who'd been affirmed and socially transitioned from a very young age. And hey presto, only 6% of them desisted.
Of course. Of course.
Yes. So, if you want to increase persistence of feelings of discomfort in your sexed body and perhaps your gender role that's imposed on you, then by all means do affirmation and social transition. And what really bothers me is that this is a new approach that is an experiment, and yet schools are doing it, and schools are not only doing it, but they're doing it behind parents' backs.
And why do you have any more evidence? Why are schools doing it? Is it because they're afraid not to?
I think because the Trans Inclusion Schools Guidance tells them to, and it's been presented as the only legitimate approach. That once you label a child transgender, you're giving them a political, they're
totally
a member of a political group rather than being a child.
Yeah.
And so it becomes about political rights of a minority group. So once you politicize it, then teachers become afraid of doing anything other than what the trans activists are saying. And in fact, there's nowhere in equality law that says you must affirm and transition a child. There's nothing about approach. That is, it's actually a clinical matter. And the Hilary Cass review of the Tavistock, the independent review, her interim report referenced that social transition is an active intervention that could have a significant effect on the child's psychological development. So that's a matter for the experts. It's not a matter, that is not a matter for teachers. Teachers are not qualified to do that. And activists are not qualified to give that.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think as you've said, I think it's really quite clear that their concern is not children. It is the one more person with a political identity that they can use. The more children that there are who have this political identity, the stronger their ability to say, well, look, there are thousands of us, we're strong. And, and they have done from their side, they have actually done really quite a good job of this, especially with the teenagers. They've given them something, no longer emo or punk. They've given them this to feel part of, which is, clever on their part, but really not helpful for actual kids. It's been terrible for children. I'm so angry with these activists who are just doing it. It's so obvious that they're just doing it for themselves, for the politics of it. It's terrible.
I think we have to separate, don't we? It's protection of an ideology and for political gains rather than protection of the child. And anybody involved with child safeguarding. It should be just a red flag alert. And again, it
Yes.
hasn't been, you know, amongst the child charities and health professional bodies have all become political activists in this area regarding children, rather than treating children as children. And again, once you put those words together, transgender child, everybody looks at the transgender bit and forgets the child. And all children have the right to be treated as children and considered individually as children, and not being put into a political category where adults can use them for their own, you know, political campaign aims.
Yes. No, I think that's absolutely true. But it is getting like the Hillary Cass thing. I mean, is this having any effect? You know, are things reversing? Can you see, you know, more questioning around things happening?
Yeah, I think the government are listening to Hillary Cass. I think, I feel very cheered by, well, her report again is, you know, I've read it through so many times now, and it is again vindication of everything I've been saying, and which is, you know, in a nutshell, the conclusion of the report is that these kids deserve the same standards of care as any other child that is accessing mental health or clinical services, paediatric services, and they're not. And it was really clear to me that they're not, you know, from the start. And so, yeah, I mean, that's it for me. They deserve exactly the same level of care. We have a duty of care, and it hasn't been met, and children have been failed, and children have been damaged because of that failure. And the failure is because the treatment has been based on an ideology, and an ideology is like a faith that it doesn't need evidence. In fact, evidence is a huge threat. So that's why you see the Tavistock not collecting data, not using research and evidence, not following up the children, and, you know, going into adult services. So they don't need to, you know, if your approach and your treatment is based on a faith, you don't need evidence to support it, because that means you lack faith.
But why have the Tavistock allowed themselves to go down this sort of faith-based route? It seems quite astonishing, doesn't it?
It is to me, yes. I mean, you know, the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust is a Stonewall diversity champion, and the NHS itself, you know, it's really gone right across the board, the capture of institutions, public bodies. So why that has happened, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But it's a real wake-up call, I think, you know, for us as a society, you know, how this was allowed to happen, and the damage that it's caused.
But, you know, but we're still not there, are we? I mean, we can all see the damage, and more and more people can see the damage. But the other side is still, you know, it's all happy, and this is great, and everything's great, and you've got these bunch of, you know, horrible, terrible transphobes who will do anything and say anything to, you know, even to the extent that they want to commit genocide. It's, you know, it's still going on. You know, there are more and more people looking around and saying, hang on, there's a problem here. And there's this massive pretense that nobody is saying anything. I mean, we saw that, you know, the ex-head of Stonewall, I think, there was that report that came out today, the poll that they had done with sort of 5,000 people with focus groups, etc. But even that was spun in a way that it was, you know, oh, Britain's, you know, it's not really polarized. When, like, we know it's hugely divisive. It's hugely divisive because it needs a resolution. This isn't going to go away by everyone saying, oh, you know, sort of live and let live, because this is a massively divisive issue, and it's a problem, and it's harming women, but it's really harming children. You know, I mean, I know for me, you know, seeing it at the, you know, back in 2015, it was very much sort of in the women's spaces, etc. But recently, looking at the whole children thing, it's it's appalling, really, really. I mean, it's just terrible. The lack of care to what's happening. As you say, it's a massive societal issue. And when it is over, and I do think it will be, because it's not going to carry on because more and more people are seeing it, there really does need to be sort of, history lessons looking at how did this happen? How was this allowed to happen under everyone's noses? Like a few people shouting, here I am, listen to this. I mean, going back to the My Body Is Me book, this that was part, you published that with Rachel Rooney, didn't you?
Yes.
And the astonishing fuss, like the vilification, the hate for what it turns out was an absolutely beautiful book, just beautiful, lovely, beautiful message, beautiful inclusion, beautiful sort of prose and beautiful illustrations. And you'd think that it was like a manifesto for, I don't know, for, let's say, genocide. It was incredible, the vilification.
They destroyed her career.
Yes, absolutely.
Career. And the children's publishing industry did not stand up for her. And this is the really scandalous thing. And I think the level of bullying of women in particular has been enabled and allowed by government ministers, MPs, organisations, public, people who have a public profile have enabled this, either directly supported it or
actually doing it,
or remained silent and allowed it to happen. So it's another aspect of this that that level of bullying has not been called out, and it's still presented as, there are strong views on both sides, and both sides can be abusive, but nobody is losing their jobs for expressing their beliefs in gender identity. And yet, even despite the Maya Forstage case, where so-called gender critical beliefs, which is just an understanding of human biology, it's not a niche belief. It's
no.
Recognition of that biological sex exists. So that is protected in law. But you look at the Alison Bailey case, for example, and it's clear that if anybody expresses those beliefs in the workplace, it is by definition transphobic, and therefore, they can be penalised for it. And it's the same in schools. You cannot express the belief in biological sex anymore or understand it without being called transphobic. And you can't stand up for women's rights without it being called transphobic. I've heard that the term adult human female is a transphobic dog whistle. So,
yes.
So in fact, even though that belief, or in fact, in biological fact, is protected in law, in practice, it's not allowed in society to express that belief. You are a bigot if you have that belief, and it doesn't work the other way.
No.
They can, and it's not just a sort of fringe group. I mean, it's prominent trans spokespeople who have bullied me and who speak out and bully and call us an anti-trans hate group, call other people bigots and transphobes and evil and Nazis, and try to make out that we're connected to the far-right evangelical,
Yes.
So it's not just a fringe group.
No.
It's the main.
No, I mean, it is. I mean, I saw today. Obviously, Billy Bragg retweeted it, saying, "Oh, this is what trans inclusion looks like," and it was Unison who had sort of pledged to sort of stand up for our trans siblings. But one of the things that they had in their sort of speech about this was that. Oh, hang on, where was I? So Unison speech was
Did they say
that yeah, pardon?
Did they say "ter" somewhere in it?
No, I've lost my thread. But it was oh yes, that was right. It was that they would have to that they would give that people should be given information about the far right links between gender criticality and sort of US evangelistic sort of far right links. And you're like, where is this information? You know, I mean, this is Unison's, and they also said, and we need to call out sort of fake news about, you know, we need to get the truth out there. And you're like, where is this information? I mean, this whole idea of this far right sort of association, and like, this is Unison. This is a big union. This is a sort of powerful union, sort of repeating this. And do they genuinely believe it? Or are they just lying?
Can they present real evidence? The evidence against TransgenderTrend was that we were listed on the Wolf website, which is that is a coalition between right-wing women and left-wing women.
Yeah.
Which, you know, fair enough. I don't mind who people, you know, build coalitions with. But that website had listed organisations on the left, and TransgenderTrend appeared there, although we're politically neutral, you know, actually.
Yeah.
But they had a list of organisations on the left and a list of organisations on the right who are you know, sort of fighting gender ideology. And that's it. I mean, you know, they have a right to put on I mean, they're not far right evangelical group, but they have a right to put on their website links to other useful websites.
Yes, of course.
So that was the evidence. Now, you know, I would love to get massive amounts of funding from
yes.
this.
Well, absolutely.
But we don't.
But honestly, I think it's the sort of lying spin that I really can't stand. I mean, honestly, if you're going to take sort of one sort of brief association on one website to vilify everyone, I mean, honestly, the shit that we could bring up, like you could say, well, look at this person who's raped somebody or this person who's done this, but it's not right, because I know that doesn't sort of that's not the whole movement. I can actually be truthful about what I believe. I don't have to paint these terrible associations. And I'm still really shocked that you've got like prominent organizations which you think should be reasonable and should be fact-based, because they're actually fighting for everyone in their sort of organizations, who have taken on this sort of really political slant. And it's all about vilifying a set of people in order to shut them up, isn't it? Shut them down.
And in fact, all they're doing is repeating the political mantras of the lobby groups. And they're, you know, as supposedly sort of neutral organisations, they should be looking at, as you say, facts and evidence. But it's like the Welsh government, and others saying trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are valid.
Yes. It's such a letdown for non-binary people, isn't it? That last bit. You think a little like a mantra should go up, and there should be something massive at the end. Yeah. But actually, it's just it's that damp squib of, well, you're valid, man. All I've got for you is you're valid.
It's almost like nobody can actually say what a non-binary person is without sort of revealing the, you know,
the truth behind the curtain.
They're either male or female, or they're a bit of both. Or we know that's biologically impossible, you know, except I think there's extremely rare cases have been recorded of a sort of genuine sort of mixture of chromosomes, you know, but so rare but yes, I think it's very revealing that non-binary people are just valid. But you get these sort of a sort of mindless political mantra that hasn't been examined for what it actually means. And you've got
I think that's right.
Governments repeating it, and so it's like everybody's lost their ability to think critically, or look at evidence, look at both sides of an argument. And again, yes, that's part of the lesson.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel for me, being sort of part of this, for me, I feel that I've actually learned to look at things critically. You kind of have to in order to justify yourself. Although honestly, I'm so fed up. I think, like somebody on Twitter was saying, you've got women saying, you've got like rational man that comes along and says, "Oh, I don't understand this," and women say, "Well, here are the reasons. These are the problems, etc." And man's like, "Oh, this is terrible. Look, all these women are shouting at me, and I wish I could understand this." And it's ridiculous, because for me, I feel that I have actually learned to look at evidence critically, learned to make a much better argument, sort of to back up my point. But it seems that is this huge swathe of people and organisations who you think should be able to do this have lost their ability to do it. They're deliberately making themselves stupid in order to continue to push this, or to be part of, or to agree with this weird idea that really doesn't make any sense.
You do make yourself look stupid, because as soon as you begin to examine gender identity or ideology, it falls apart. So, these groups will define gender as a social construct, and yet we're supposed to possess this feeling of gender before birth, but when we are pre-social and we don't know what our society yet thinks is feminine or masculine, but we already possess. So as soon as you start to examine it, it falls apart. And so if you don't do that and you just support it, then you are going to make yourself look stupid. I mean, interestingly, when it comes up against reality, it falls apart. So we have every single independent systematic analysis of studies come out with the same conclusion, whether it was Carl Hennigan doing the study for the Panorama programme. So he's the professor of evidence-based medicine at Oxford, and his report concluded that it was not safe practice for children, the puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. The NICE reports, Florida's just looked at all of the evidence. Sweden, Finland, France, and here in the UK. Once you look at all the evidence, it doesn't stack up. There isn't the evidence to support this treatment. The other interesting thing I found was when we were given permission to intervene in the Keira Bell versus the Tavistock, Keira Bell and Mrs. A versus the Tavistock. In that case, we had to present, so I wrote about 6,000 word witness statement and collated all an evidence bundle. This is going back to 2020. And I remember it was a really hot August, and I'd done all this work and just really wanted to go and have a break and swim in the sea.
Swim, yeah.
Yeah. And I think this was a bit unusual. I think normally that then you're either accepted or not accepted, but they wanted us to present the witness statement and the evidence bundle and get that completely ready for them to make a decision on. I don't know, I can't remember exactly what happened, but we had a deadline and it was in sort of, I don't know, less than 2 weeks' time. So it was so I had to just work to get this ready. And Stonewall and Mermaids had also both applied to intervene in that case, and they didn't get their witness statements in on time, and when they did, they were judged to be not relevant to the case. So they were sort of based on things like human rights, transgender child's rights, and that wasn't what the case was about. The case was about whether a child is capable of giving informed consent. So even on that level, they were denied permission to intervene on that bet on exactly the same criteria. It wasn't a transphobic judge; it was exactly the same criteria as me. And the evidence that I presented, it also had to be different evidence to what had already been presented. So my evidence was about the cultural environment that children come from and the messages they get, and therefore when they enter the clinic, they are already believing a set of ideas which are not challenged, so they're not given alternative ways of understanding themselves, and without that they're not fully informed. So it's a different, all the other witness statements were about the treatments themselves, and so I understood the question.
Yeah.
I understood the brief, and I answered it, with documented evidence, links. You know, I'd had pages and pages of detransitioner testimonies. I had, you know, all sorts to support and back up my argument, which brought a new aspect to the case. Now, Stonewall and Mermaids failed to do that, and they failed to get information in on time. And I just thought, well, there you have it. Once you submit your case to an authority,
Yes.
they failed, I succeeded.
Yes, and that was Stonewall and Mermaids, and
it's because my case was relevant to the case and supported by facts and evidence. And to me, that was really a really clear judgment on the difference between us.
I mean, I think it's been interesting, even you know, whenever there's a court case where you do actually have to, you know, people are exposed, aren't they? Mm-hmm. You know, like Stonewall, Mermaids, they're exposed for. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm going to say sort of charlatans to an extent, because it's all sort of smoke and mirrors, isn't it? It's all anger and sort of outrage and sort of campaigning, but the facts don't necessarily bear them out at all.
It's based on, you know, what I assume to be very strongly held beliefs. And again, I wouldn't judge anybody for having those beliefs. I mean, I think, I am sure that some of those beliefs are cynical beliefs from some quarters, and they're they're not benign. They're beliefs that are there for a political purpose. But I'm not going to try and second guess who is genuine and who's not. But they are beliefs, and they have a right to hold those beliefs, but they don't have the right to impose those beliefs on everybody else, or silence anybody else from questioning those beliefs. And that's where it gets dangerous, and that's where I think everybody in society should be aware that is a red flag. And when it comes to children, that's a real safeguarding issue. There's, the children should not be treated according to adult beliefs of a certain group.
No.
They should be treated according. I mean, beliefs, but the beliefs should be based on facts and evidence, and robustly questioned before we apply them to children.
So, do you see anything changing? Do you see it getting better?
I think the house of cards is falling, absolutely, and I think that started at actually, perhaps 2 years ago. But yeah, the evidence is piling up and piling up and piling up. How can we ignore it? So as well as what's happening in the UK, and Sajid Javid called for an urgent inquiry into hormone treatments. The Department for Education has shown that they are, that they brought out that as part of the RSE guidance, over a year ago, for schools. So yes, I think the government are really listening. But also, I think the evidence is piling up, looking at whether this treatment is beneficial or harmful to children. But also, you've got the most prominent gender affirmative pioneers in the US who have been performing surgeries and giving hormones to children, speaking out about this cohort of teenagers, and they are mentioning all the things that have been spoken about from our side.
Yeah.
You know, social contagion and the irreversible treatments.
And we're like, yeah, yep.
So we've
yep.
got, you know, it sort of started really with Lisa Littman's great study on you know, parental reports of children. They're mostly adolescent girls. We had Abigail Schreier's book in the States, Irreversible Damage, which I think, you know, really did a lot to introduce the US and globally actually to this subject. And everything, the other red flag is that everything that happens that shows evidence for our side is shut down. So Brown University took down that Lisa Littman study and re-examined it. It came out again with no change, no changed conclusion to it. But universities will not stand up for academics.
The publishing industry, academics.
I think Amazon banned Irreversible Damage, didn't they? Or was it Target Books? But yes, so yeah, when you see that happening, that this is the suppression of free speech and reasonable free speech. It's not inciting hatred free speech. It's reasonable, well-argued, evidence-based free speech.
And incredibly important free speech. Jesus.
Yeah. So that's really chilling. It's really, you know, it's sort of Stalinist. It's suppression of freedom of thought.
One of the most shocking things that I think I've ever seen in my adult life in a sort of a political movement. It really is one of the most shocking ones that I've seen. It's something that really is at a societal level unbelievably important to sort of counter, not just for this particular subject, but for everything, but for the way as a society we can actually function in terms of sort of rights and conflicting rights and democracy. It's been one of the most shocking things that I have ever witnessed, ever.
It's thought control, and it's, you know, it's thought by control by the most vicious bullying. You know, people lose their livelihoods for having the wrong thoughts. So you know, and yes, what we're seeing is not democracy.
No,
it's supposed to be, you know, a democratic society. I mean, one of the areas that is most unbelievable is the control of the press and the media. So, you know, the press fight for their freedom to publish, you know, whatever they want, and yet they're calling rapists she, and women, paedophiles are women, and even the press is kowtowed to this ideology. It's like a state of fear that people are, and you know, you think, when even the press is cowed by it, you know, there's something really wrong.
Yes, but where is everyone? I mean, it's been left to a bunch of women on the whole to just say, hang on, like, there's a problem. And we have been doing it. More and more people are getting on board, definitely, you know, loads of men laterally. But it really has been left on the whole to, like, women to say, there's a problem here. We can see there's a problem with children, because women have always seen when there's a problem with children, haven't they? And this is what you saw. You saw it, and you couldn't not do anything about it. You had to do something about it. You said, like, no, I'm not having this. I want to change it.
Yeah, I couldn't.
And you did.
Yes. Yeah. I think I'm very optimistic. I mean, I am also hugely distressed and angry by the collateral damage, and not, you know, to children and young people who have to pick up the pieces and live their lives in a way that no young person has ever had to face before. They're in a completely unique position. They've never had the medical profession take away their puberty before. You know, that this has not happened, and change their body in ways that are irreversible, and they have to live with, and they have to come to terms with. And so but not just them. It's the fact of the number of families, the number of distressed parents I've spoken to, particularly in the early days, who are vilified and whose lives have been ripped apart by this, and families have been split up by it. And it's almost like I can understand in some ways why people don't want to go there, and people, even parents will go along with it because
I see. Yes, yes.
the cost
Because
of
at
not
least,
going along with it is so great. You're painted as public enemy number one. Not only is your child encouraged to think of you in that way, but the whole of society is going to judge you as a transphobic bigot who doesn't support their child. So again, this is a completely unique situation for parents who normally, if the subject is drugs or alcohol or other sort of teenage problems. So yeah, there's some people that are going to blame the parents, but generally you'll get support from society and you'll get support services that as the parent of a teenager who's gone off the rails, you'll have some sympathy and you'll have some support. These parents don't. They have nowhere to go.
But it's also, but there's more, isn't there? Because if you decide that you can't face the vilification, etc., and you go down the affirmation route, you've then got a vested interest in, of the decision that you've made. You've got a vested interest to continue it. And, and almost like a reformed smoker, you're going to be one of the most vocal. I've done this. I cannot bear the idea that other people have not done it and possibly have outcomes that I possibly wanted but decided not to go for. It's a massive sort of cycle of bringing people into the fold who then will continue. It's a massive vicious circle, because they will continue to the vilification of the ones who won't do it.
It's a really common and human dynamic, this, and for parents. So, I think you're absolutely right. Mermaids is a case in point. Where once you decide on your parenting approach, you will defend it to the death and you will vilify. So you see it with sort of the authoritarian parents versus the liberal parents. And what happens is that those two groups become more and more extreme. They find evidence to support them. They ignore evidence that's against them. And it's like, to support your approach as a parent, and I think particularly as a mother, you have to defend your way. You cannot allow that maybe you were to blame in some way. You got it wrong. You made mistakes. And actually, all parents get it wrong and make mistakes. No parent is perfect, and it would be awful if we were. And to accept that, and to know that actually in the end, most of our clumsy attempts don't cause lasting damage. It's like, it's fine to be imperfect. But yeah, there's a huge investment in being in your self-image as a good parent, and my children reflect me, and it's very human. And I think parents have to really be aware of that, and sort of try and let go of it. But it is a human sort of response. It's not unusual, but in this area, it causes so much damage. And I think it's part of the parents who go along with it as well. What it gives, parents are always part of seeking out a diagnosis is that as well, because then the parent can say, it's not my fault, it's because my child's autistic or ADHD or has behavioural opposition defiance disorder. It's not just
trans.
It's not just that they're naughty because I'm not a very good parent. It's not my fault, and again, that's a really understandable thing. But that in this area has caused so much damage. But the certainty that the parent wants is also based on that initial idea that there's something wrong with the child. And I don't buy into that a child's behaviour, interests, what a child says in this area indicates that there's something wrong with the child that needs being changed. It's something that the child, if the child is being bullied, the little boy is being bullied for being too feminine, then the school needs to deal with that. The parents need to deal with that. And the problem does not reside in the child, and it certainly doesn't reside in the child's body. And the child's body does not need changing in order to make everybody feel comfortable with that child. But it's much more complicated. It's a much more complicated approach to say, okay, the school should have zero tolerance towards that kind of bullying when children are policing gendered behaviour all the time. Children are actually very conservative, and they will be policing that and bullying on account of that. It's more complicated, and it's more hard work for society to say, well, how can we deal with that and help that child and support that child, rather than say, oh, that child's trans, so we'll say he's a girl, and then everybody can relax and it's easier again because now she is playing with dolls and that's normal.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? How that's really, it seems to me clearly in the best interests of society. They can then just sort of go back in, we can just move them into a different box and then we can all relax. But it doesn't seem in the best interest of the child at all, does it? Because we've ignored what the problem is here.
To me, acceptance means acceptance that the little boy plays with dolls and likes wearing princess costumes. That's acceptance. Acceptance of him as a girl is not acceptance at all.
No, that's very true. That's not acceptance, is it?
The reality is he's not a girl. He is a boy. So why can't we just accept him as a boy and help and encourage him to accept himself as a boy, and also the other children to accept him, that it's fine for him to be like this.
And it's such an obviously better solution, not just for the boy, but for the school, the other kids, for society as a whole, for women, for everyone to just say there's a diverse way, these diverse ways of being like a boy or a girl.
That's true diversity.
That's true diversity, yes. Yeah. Like Rachel Rooney's book, that is true diversity. What she's talking about there is true diversity, accepting everyone for who they are, as opposed to saying we'll accept you if you pretend to be someone else. That's not true diversity, is it? Not at all.
No, it's accepting that the gender stereotypes are true.
Yeah.
And it is only girls who should be playing with dolls and wearing princess costumes, and therefore if we change you into a girl, then the problem goes away. It's not. And again, this is the very youngest children, and they deserve an approach that's based on adult understanding, and not. They shouldn't be the sort of receptacles for the sort of problems and issues in society.
No,
we should not be transferring the problem to the child and the child's body. We should be looking at why is children's marketing so extremely gendered now, and can we deal with that, please? But what are the messages we're giving children when we constantly promote to them, this is for girls, this is for boys? There are issues we really need to look at, and it's to sort of say, oh, it's the child, the child's the problem is not fair.
No, you're that's a really, really good way of putting it. We've all thought about this so much, but I hadn't necessarily sort of conceptualize it as people saying, the child is the problem, not everything else.
It's the same. with the teenage girl. So you look at the case of teenage girls, and the situation has got so much worse in terms of porn culture, sexual assault in schools, constant media, the objectification and pornification of women. You know, it used to be page 3, didn't it? And I know the effect that had on me. And now, you know, you can see very clearly the path from objectification to exploitation and abuse through porn.
Yeah.
Easy it is to abuse a class of people once you've dehumanized them. And now women are presented as not just sexual objects, but sexual objects that enjoy being abused in the most degrading and humiliating ways and violent ways. And that's accessible to this generation on smartphones. So girls now, I mean, you know, teenagers, adolescence is a struggle, and I think that's probably true for most teenagers. You know, it can be a very rocky road. But I think for girls there are more issues. So things like yucky menstruation and the way that your body betrays you by developing breasts and hips, and it's really visible how you're now a woman and you can't be that sort of gender neutral person anymore. And then, of course, the attention you get, that your body suddenly becomes public property. And if you don't, either you fit the ideal and you get sexually harassed, even groped, even, you know, assaulted. Everybody seems to have or men seem to have the right to make comments on your body.
Yeah,
if you don't fit
definitely.
the ideal, you will get the same. You'll get horrible comments made about your body and how you look. And girls have been finding ways to stop themselves becoming women for quite a while now. Things like, you know, anorexia, eating disorders, self-harm, sometimes just like putting on loads of weight to become a non-sexual person. And, you know, I see this sort of easy answer now, though you were born in the wrong body. And I mean, what teenage girl doesn't feel that? I think most, you know, within Instagram culture as well, and the idea, you know, the fact that you have to be, you know, groomed to the nth degree before you can even leave the house. So the pressures on girls are so magnified compared to when I was growing up.
I think that's right. It's actually, I hadn't really considered how much more magnified it was. I mean, we all had it. You know, you'd go on the bus on the way back from school and some boys would have like a magazine that they'd found under a bush by the local river, you know, and were just sort of a porn mag. But now it's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you did feel.
And of course, the response is magnified. And now you've got a huge, huge cohort of girls saying, fuck that, I'm opting out. And people are saying, yeah, okay, of course you can.
You know, those feelings of the anorexic, you know, they're based on body hatred, they're based on self-rejection, self-hatred, you know, not good enough, not a proper girl. And, oops, sorry.
It's all right.
My phone. So all of those awful self-rejecting feelings in adolescence, now we're saying to girls, you're right to feel that way. You're right to, you know, you're not a proper girl. Yes, you're right to feel that body hatred and disgust and disassociation from your own body. And this is what affirmation means. This is what affirming a girl as a boy actually means. You're not right. You're not, you know, you're not a proper girl. And to me, that is, again, it's placing the problem with the girl herself and with her body. And rather than actually looking at what society and our culture is creating, those problems for girls, and how we can address those issues and help girls manage their way and navigate their way through this culture, and help them to have resilience. Rather than doing that, we are saying, yes, you're right, the problem lies with you and you need to change yourself medically, you know, in the most extreme way possible.
Yeah. And of course it snowballs as well, doesn't it? Because other girls think, oh, well, actually, I feel the same. I'm like that. I've got the same problem.
It's the same as with cosmetic surgery. So you get sort of, teenage girls and young women getting boob jobs, or all sorts of cosmetic procedures, which sets the bar higher and higher for other women, for other girls, that if they're not perfect, because these procedures exist now, because we have sort of medical ways of changing, and that all of them put pressure, and just makeup and skin products, the amount of product there is now, shaving and waxing and all of that. Again, there weren't those things when I was growing up, so you had no choice. You could. I think we shaved our legs, and I sometimes put some eyeshadow on. But very little. And now, with the range of products and procedures available, some girls will do that, and then the other girls look even more dowdy, and the bar gets set higher and higher. So you can see that the spread of cosmetic procedures anyway, how it's a kind of social contagion. And you're right, the same with this, that it becomes something that you can do. You can choose not to go through puberty. You now have a choice. Well, you now have a choice about whether to be a girl or a boy, and which teenage girl going through those awful feelings.
I'd have totally chosen boy. Totally. Yes, I think there's like no doubt in my mind. I'd have gone for boy.
I'd have gone for boy. Well, you can't say for certain, but I think the position that I was in, absolutely, if something could stop this happening to me, if I had that choice. Then, and I think it's Glosswitch wrote a brilliant piece about this and said, what does that say about the girls who do choose puberty? And it's almost like saying,
I like this. I want this objectification. I want this. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Point. Yeah, you make it into a choice. And the thing is, it's not a choice. You will either go through puberty or you won't. What you won't do if you take this treatment is go through boy puberty. You'll miss out on puberty altogether, and then you'll get a dose of the wrong sex hormones, and what that does to your body. But you will not go through puberty. It's a myth that you can actually.
Yes, it is.
Well, that you can change sex.
Well, exactly. That myth has been there. Like that's the big myth, isn't it? And everything else stems from that. This idea that you puberty blockers, and then you can take cross-sex hormones and you go through puberty of the other sex, and you're like, that's such a ridiculously simplistic idea. Does anyone believe it?
It's like society is bending over backwards to deny biological reality and to deny facts that sex is immutable and there are two sexes. So bending over backwards to do that. And children, of course, who are socially transitioned in the younger years hit that wall of reality at puberty when their bodies start developing.
Yes, exactly.
Then the lie is exposed, because you can really easily get away with it until then. But also, the recent case of men breastfeeding newborn babies when they don't produce breast milk. So we're even willing to continue this experiment on newborn babies with no evidence, that with no idea whether this is going to cause harm.
One of the most shocking things, isn't it? Just when you think, all right, this is bad enough, but it can't really get any worse. And then this comes along, and you're like, and there are so many people championing it. I mean, you've got women saying this is really bad, and then you've got some people saying it's just achi. But why are people saying, well, it's just it's milk. He's helping out, without any thought to the baby.
The rights
to the baby.
Of the baby. Yeah. And you think, how far will we go to deny biology? How far will a society go to actually deny biology? It
is like I was saying earlier, one of the most astonishing things that I've ever witnessed, that I've ever seen. is incredible. And you know, sometimes I think, oh, it's definitely getting better because the message is definitely getting out there. We've said this so many times. 5 or 6 years ago, you'd start talking about it and people would be like, I don't really know what you're talking about, or have this vague idea and say, oh, well, you know, it's just like a handful of transsexuals. But now, you know, the message is out there, people do know, but they don't know the details. I don't think anyone's really, you know, people have heard of like trans and sort of trans kids and things, but it's still not massively mainstream. I don't think that there's huge problems with it.
And again, how much is that down to the mantra of no debate right from the start?
Totally, and the capture of the papers,
and suppressing any debate. So
yeah,
I think that report that came out today showed that the public are actually not well informed. If the public were more informed, the results would be. I mean, I think the results actually reflect our concerns, that people are generally accepting of people living their own lives and being allowed to, but when it comes up against other people's rights, then there are concerns. It sort of reflects all of our views.
Absolutely.
Very fair, very tolerant, you know.
We are the compassionate Britons. We are them. It's not sort of two sides, ants and compassionate Britons in the middle. We are the compassionate Britons. You know, we've been talking about it in this way for like a really, really long time. We are those compassionate Britons.
There's some sort of extremist ideology that, and in fact, you know, think, you know, when people know the issues, most people would feel the same as us, and it's a moderate and you know, just sort of quite ordinary.
The only difference between us is that we're speaking up. That's the only difference. That's the only difference.
Well, I think some of us were in positions where we found out information that perhaps most people would never find out if they weren't involved in certain, you know, in my area of work, I was.
Well, you sorted out. Well, I suppose yes, you're right. I mean, you were already there in sort of communication with children, and so for you, it was a sort of natural progression. But what you did was you said, "Hang on, I think there's a problem," and that's what a lot of people have not done. And Stephanie, for that, I think we all need to say thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
We've come. I think we've come to the end now. I mean, I could carry on talking all night, but Jenny, I think people need to go and have dinner. To be honest, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming. It would be lovely if you came on again, but next time you need to wear your medal.
Once I get it, yes, I'm going to wear it all the time. I'm going to wear it to the beach. I'm going to wear it.
You'll be pinning it onto your swimming costume.
It's been lovely to catch up, Helen. We go back a long way. It's been lovely to catch up and have a chat because I haven't seen you for a long time.
Absolutely, it's been really lovely, and everyone in the chat. I think there's been some really thoughtful comments. I think I've really enjoyed reading everything. So thank you everyone for turning up, and Stephanie, thank you once more. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations.
Thanks, Helen.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.